I'm trying to be more cognizant of the ability to enjoy the present moment, to enjoy what is right in front of me without being too preoccupied about how long is this person going to be in my life, or how long are we going to stick around for each other, or how invested do I want to get if I don't know how long this person's going to be in my life. Hello and welcome to the podcast, to another episode of Queerly Overthinking. I'm your host, Adam Harper, and today I want to dive into something that's been on my mind lately: friendships and relationships, and specifically how we navigate those relationships. I feel like each of these connections that we have can be incredibly complex as we go through life, and especially as we grow older and our lives change. I feel like it's important to take a moment and reflect on the different types of relationships one can have and how they may impact us. So with that in mind, let's get started. Well, y'all, I am very excited for this episode. I'm a little nervous, but also just like ready to kind of put this out there, just because this is something that, as mentioned, I've been thinking about a lot lately. So with that, let's start by talking about what I mean by like relationships and friendships, and like how those specifically relate to one another. And I feel like there are the day-to-day friendships and relationships that you have versus the ones where you maybe catch up every so often. As I was thinking about this, it was interesting to consider how proximity can be a huge factor in affecting those dynamics, and how some friends may remain closer despite the distance, while others may naturally drift apart. It's all very complex and really interesting when you think about it. I came across this TikTok by Sabrina. She is a friendship and relationship coach. It really hit home for me. So I want to play that video for y'all, and then I'm going to share my thoughts on it.
We need to start categorizing friends the correct way. I think we're all getting confused here. I think we're confusing low effort friendships as like good friends when they're just merely acquaintances. I think the level of effort that a person gives to you and that you give to them should be the level of commitment that you give to each other. The best kind of friend that you can have, that you should label as a best friend or a close friend, is someone that is frequently communicating with you and is high emotionally invested in you. And the frequent communication can be in all types of communication, sending memes, sending TikToks, texting, calling, Snapchatting, whatever. You just know that you are in frequent communication with each other, even if it's in different types of communication styles, or I guess different types of communication methods. They're also very highly emotionally invested in you as you are with them. So if things happen, like big moments in your life, they're the first one that you call. They're the first one that you tell. If something tragic happened, or if a crisis happened in your life, they are the first person that you call to gain support, and vice versa. That is a best friend. That is a close friend. If they're not supportive, and if they do not communicate with you often, you should not be labeling them as close friend ever. So let's say they frequently communicate with you, however, it's low emotional investment. They're not the type of person that you're going to call and ask for help, ask for advice. They're the kind of friends that aren't very good with the support part of it or the shoulder to cry on part of it. That doesn't mean that they're a bad person or a bad friend. They just shouldn't be categorized as a close friend or a best friend. You still communicate very often, you still hang out a lot, which is wonderful, but the emotional investment is pretty low on both ends. They don't call you to tell you their problems, and you don't call them. So it's safe to say that they are a good, decent friend. Now, if we have high emotional investment but infrequent communication, this is usually someone that is a childhood friend or friends that are old friends based on history. They're like the old high school friends that you don't really talk to as much, but if you really, really needed them, they'd be there. You're going on about your lives, you have different things going on, your life has changed, you're not as invested in each other. Like, you're still invested, but I mean, like, you're not hanging out or like in each other's perimeter. You could be friends, but you're in different states or different countries. Your life are just completely different than when you were friends as kids. You still have a lot of love for each other, but you just don't communicate as often as you did. Now, if you have infrequent communication and low emotional investment, you're most likely dealing with an acquaintance. For me, I also see this category as low maintenance friends because you're not really doing too much to maintain the relationship. It's low emotional investment and it's low communication. So this is where they kind of fall. You don't really have any like hate for them, you have love for them, but they're just acquaintances. It's great when they're there, but you really don't really bat an eye when they're not. And again, it's not like a bad thing. That doesn't make them a bad person. It just means that they're not so close in your close-knit circle because there is not much of the effort being put in. The effort is very minimal and it's very low. When you call each other to catch up, it's very calm, good, collected, superficial, but it's not very emotional investment there. You're not telling them like your issues or your problems or if something really bad happened or if you had a bad day. They're not the type of person that you're going to call. And on top of that, you guys don't communicate that often. Like, rarely do you guys send a text message. Rarely do you call each other. Rarely do you send each other memes. It's just very low maintenance. When it comes to friends and emotional investment as well as communication, it is imperative to understand where your friend is in the chart so that you're not giving too much to them and you're expecting someone to be a best friend, but they're not treating you as a best friend, because that's how you're going to end up getting hurt. The level of effort between you both have to match, and it will save you a lot of pain if you're labeling a friend as a best friend when they're not treating you like a best friend. So make sure if you're labeling someone as a close friend, best friend, that they're giving you the high emotional investment that you deserve and they're frequently communicating with you. Anything else falls into these other three categories.
Alrighty, so after listening to Sabrina's video, it made me realize how important it is to determine how much I should emotionally invest in my various relationships and friendships. I definitely feel like I have people in all four corners of that spectrum that they mentioned. Since leaving college, more people have shifted towards either high emotional investment but not as frequent communication, or vice versa, low investment but high communication. And some have become more like acquaintances. But shifting corners, I don't feel like is a bad thing. I feel like it's perfectly normal and healthy for this to happen in life. Speaking for myself, I mean, there's only so much that I can do each day to keep the people in my life informed and up to date on what's happening. One of the many reasons why I love social media is because I can give a preview or a glimpse of what I've been up to and be able to update folks that I've connected with over the years. But again, social media has its own ups and downs for sure, but that is definitely one thing that I appreciate, that while it might not give a whole picture, I'm able to at least give a little glimpse or peek into what's happening. Thinking about these different types of friendships, it helps to frame them within the context of emotional investment and communication frequency. And if I'm being honest, it kind of alleviates a little bit of guilt around that, but I'll get into that in just a little bit. While Sabrina's model is one way to look at it, and again, I don't know specifically if this is a model they came up with specifically or if it's from somebody else. It's just what I came across on TikTok, but there's another model that I want to discuss. It's kind of a fun little modern way, modern approach to it, but I think of it as a like friendship subscription model in a way. I learned this from a TikTok too, I believe, but I can't seem to find it. I really tried hard to find it, but I'll just share with you what it shared with me. So imagine your relationships are like subscriptions, and we'll start with the first one. Daily subscribers. These are the people that you communicate frequently with, sharing day-to-day experiences and emotions. I would say these people know what's happening in your life regularly. Oftentimes, it's more so the day-to-day, maybe mundane, or just like things that you're going about your life doing together. You're essentially doing life together is what I would say, in a way where there's not a lot of shock and surprise at what's happening in life because you both are very much aware of what's going on. The second out of the four is weekly subscribers. So regular messaging, maybe less detailed conversations, but you're sending memes, you're connecting on a semi-regular basis during the week, but you're maybe not FaceTiming them regularly, or maybe you have a standing dinner or lunch or catch-up time. The third is monthly subscribers. So think of periodic catch-ups, staying up to date through social media and text as before, but these folks maybe only see them once a month, every couple of months. And lastly, the semi-annual or annual subscribers. Infrequent, detailed catch-ups sharing more significant life updates. I would say people who you probably only see again maybe every 6 months or once a year. It just depends on so many different factors, if it's distance, if it's just timing, anything under the sun. Thinking about this model, I do feel like there's a benefit that, as I mentioned, kind of alleviates a little bit of guilt in a way, because it helped me to understand that it's okay that after you pass monthly subscribers, so to speak, that I don't have to feel necessarily guilty about my interactions being like a catch up and, life updatey in a way, rather than the daily interactions that you may have with your daily subscribers or your weekly subscribers and even monthly. It really took a minute for me to just appreciate that it's totally fine for these relationships, specifically the semi-annual, annual subscribers, to be on a more high-level download of what's happening in life. I will say, though, a drawback to this is that it might become obsessive if we're regularly grading our friendships, like on a report card, I feel like it's important to revisit and analyze and consider, the value and the connection that you have with somebody. But I also don't feel like we have to always be filling out that report card every time we have an interaction with somebody. With these two models in mind, it just had me thinking about the fluidity of relationships and how natural it is for them to change. And on a side note, that's one thing that I'm still continuing to be comfortable with is change and just how it happens. Like, there's nothing that we can really do to stop change from happening. And I think a big thing that I'm learning recently is radical acceptance of change. So that way, again, as mentioned in previous podcast episodes, appreciating the contrast of when something was going one way and now it's not. And just having that contrast, I think, is so important. I think change is so important. It is not easy. I'm not saying that it is at all. But to reel it back in a little bit, I do feel like our social circles are often influenced by change in physical distance, change in career, and evolving interests. And it's taken me a while to really grasp this concept. But again, it's something I'm really trying hard to embrace. I feel like it's important to understand that while our relationships may very often be fluid and have a lot of different factors that play into them, as mentioned, I'm trying to be more cognizant of the ability to enjoy the present moment, to enjoy what is right in front of me without being too preoccupied about how long is this person going to be in my life, or how long are we going to stick around for each other, or how invested do I want to get if I don't know how long this person's going to be in my life. You know what I mean? And on that note, oh yeah, this part I think is what took me the longest to think about and to write about, because I don't feel like we talk enough about the heartbreak of friendships ending, especially long-lasting ones where, you've shared vulnerable moments. I've been on both sides, not knowing why a friendship or relationship ended abruptly. And I've also been on the opposite side of being the one to walk away without an explanation. And it's not easy. It's not great at all to be on either end. But speaking for myself, as somebody who has had to walk away without explanation, I'm always going to be a proponent of protecting your peace. Actually, today I just found this quote on Instagram, and I feel like it reinforces my thinking on this of like protecting your peace. And it says, silence is better than unnecessary drama. Most people that I've talked to about this have shared on some level that there are also people in their lives who they no longer have friendship or relationship with. And, whether they know why it ended or not. And, I wish I had the perfect answer for this. I really do. Like, as an overthinker and someone with anxiety, I always feel like I want to overthink every possible outcome so that way I have a decision. So that way when it comes time to make that decision, it's just a simple transaction. I've already done all the thinking for it. But that's not this, unfortunately. And as stated earlier, I really do feel like no matter what the case is, whether it's with or without explanation, I do feel like protecting your peace is paramount. With all that said, I encourage you to, take some time to ponder on your friendships and your relationships and consider, who fits in your four corners or maybe your subscription levels, and how do you show up in your relationships? And I know that this is something that I've been trying to remember, but I want to share it not only on this podcast, to share it with you, to reiterate it with myself, is that the person you should always be putting the most time, the most energy, and the most effort into is yourself. Always. Period. Hard stop. That is definitely something that I am still like continuing to remind myself of, just to like really dig into that, because yeah, it's a little cliche to say, but it's honestly so true. The more that you really focus your energy towards yourself and the things that you want to do and prioritizing yourself, you're going to show up for yourself in ways that maybe you didn't even realize. I know that's what's been working for me. Not every day is perfect, let me tell you that right off the bat, but I'm trying really hard. Another aspect I want to throw into this too is encouraging folks to like view their relationships and friendships and such from like a high level agnostic perspective. I feel like it's so easy for me to fall into the mentality that if I show up harder for somebody, they are going to match that energy and show up just as hard for me. Trust me when I say that that could not be further from the truth, because there are going to be some days when you can't match somebody's energy or they can't match yours. It is a magical thing when you both are able to match energy, but that's not going to be every single day for sure, because I might be tired one day, I might have more energy the next day. So trying to just show up as I've said before, your favorite self. Your favorite self is not always going to be your best self. Your favorite self is probably going to be tired sometimes, be hangry. Heck, I know I get hangry. Yeah, okay. So there's been a couple times when some folks have asked me like, "Hey, have you had anything to eat yet recently?" And I'm like, "No." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know. I'm hangry." But again, to kind of wrap that point up, I really do appreciate it when I do find people in life who are able to match, not necessarily like the exact same percentage of energy, because again, I don't feel like that's like anything that we can really measure, but like I appreciate reciprocal connection with somebody. I appreciate an ebb and a flow, a balance. Heck, I'm a Libra, you know what I mean? Love a good balance. With all that said, I just want to encourage y'all to think about, how do you want to show up and how do you want the people in your life to show up for you? Remember that it's perfectly okay for your relationships and friendships to evolve and change over time. And it's not easy. It's hard to work through that guilt, but you should never feel guilty about how relationships change. It's natural, and I feel like it's part of life and growing, and sometimes you outgrow a type of interest or hobby, and that may mean that you don't interact with that community that maybe you did those activities with, and that you go find a new hobby or activity or interest and interact with a new community potentially. It's very interesting to see how things change and evolve. Can y'all tell there's kind of a theme here too amidst the discussion of friendships, connections, and everything. It's big on change, big on evolution of growth and such. Well, let's wrap up with a quote, shall we? Today's quote comes from Steve Lopez. They said, "A friend is someone who inspires, who challenges, who sends you in search of some truer sense of yourself." Such a great quote for today. Well, y'all, thanks again for tuning in. And I just really appreciate being able to do this with you. You know, I pulled open my laptop and pulled a chair up and pulled the microphone in. I pulled all the things in. And I really appreciated being able to just sit down. I think that's like one of my favorite parts about doing this podcast is speaking into the microphone and putting it all out there. And on that note, if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to leave it a positive review. I would greatly appreciate it, and share it with a friend. New episodes come out every other week, but until then, take care and keep overthinking, but in the best way possible. Queerly Overthinking is hosted, edited, and executive produced by Adam Harper, with additional producing by Cass Cooper. You can follow Queerly Overthinking on Instagram or TikTok at Queerly Overthinking, and you can find more at www.queerlyoverthinking.com.